Greetings, friends. Thank you for listening to The Hands of History, a production of the Society of Massage Archives, the only nonprofit dedicated to preserving the history of massage and bodywork. Because of people like you, the Society of Massage Archives exists. An archive is more than a collection of old papers and objects. It is a deliberate, organized effort to preserve history, the records, stories, and voices that would otherwise be discarded, damaged, or lost to time. Thanks to our Founders Club, 50 individuals who stepped up to help build the foundation for preserving the history of massage therapy, SOMA's work is now underway. That support has made it possible for us to begin safeguarding the stories, documents, and artifacts that have shaped our profession. But preservation isn't a one-time act. It's ongoing work. You're building something lasting. Whether it's digitizing collections, expanding access, or integrating historical knowledge into practice and education, SOMA is demonstrating how massage history matters. As a 501c3 nonprofit, we are working towards a dedicated, professionally maintained archive, one that protects our past and makes it accessible for future generations. If you believe that massage therapy's past deserves long-time care, access, and stewardship, we invite you to become a recurring contributor. Whether it's $20 a month or any amount that feels right to you, every gift, big or small, goes a long way in fulfilling our mission. Your monthly contribution helps sustain SOMA's operations year-round, so history stays alive and available for everyone in our community. History doesn't preserve itself. People do. Learn more about becoming a recurring supporter today at societyofmassagearchives.org. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of the Society of Massage Archives. These views and commentaries represent the recollections of the hosts and guests, and as such are subject to educational site inaccuracies. The content here is for informational and educational purposes only. You should conduct your own historical research when determining the veracity of any statements made within.
Greetings and welcome to the Hands of History podcast, a production of the Society of Massage Archives, where we delve into the rich tapestry of massage therapy's past, explore its evolution, and share the stories that have shaped this vital practice. Today is Monday, January 26th, 2026. I'm your host, Kirby Clark Ellis, and I'm joined today with Troy Lavigne. He has spent 2 decades at the crossroads of touch, movement, and lived experience. He opened his massage clinic in Boulder, Colorado in 2005, and has since worked everywhere from professional cycling teams and elite soccer programs to pediatric settings and international care environments, including work with children with special needs in India. His career has been shaped less by protocols and more by paying attention to bodies, nervous systems, and the stories they carry. A longtime leader in the profession, Troy served as Director of Education for the Colorado AMTA chapter from 2016 to 2023, and is a published researcher and author. He also hosts the Sensory Approach to Manual Therapy podcast, where he explores how perception, context, and history influence the way we touch and heal. Troy brings a perspective rooted in curiosity and experience, reflecting on how manual therapy evolves when we listen closely, both to the body and the moment it exists in. Welcome, Troy.
Oh, I really like that last thing you had, the moment it exists in, because that's definitely my biggest kick right now is contextualize the effects of therapy and care. Oh, that was good.
I'm glad you like that. Take me back to the beginning. What pulled you into the world of massage therapy and manual work?
It's funny. My father was a massage therapist, and here in Canada, in Quebec, where I live now, but not licensed or anything like that. He has a long history in the Indigenous culture. He's part Indigenous himself and has a long history in the shamanistic work and world of it, and comes from that, having spent a lot of time in Hawaii and India doing a lot of natural healing and energy work. And so I grew up very much around touch therapy and energy work. And my first introduction into any version of this field was actually Reiki, where I, at quite a young age, became a Reiki master and used to practice it, and practiced it avidly in Colorado. Used to teach classes prior to going to massage school. But what got me into massage school actually isn't even that. I think I was open to the idea of touch because I had grown up with it. But I never grew up passionate. I grew up wanting to be a professional soccer player. That was my lifelong goal. And then when I went to college, it was for, here in Quebec, we call it Cégep, which is just like, I guess it would be community college, was to go into the field of work for a version here of what we would call social work. It was helping people with special needs, primarily teenagers. But when I got to Colorado, I was at a crossroads and I didn't know, do I want to go into medicine? Do I want to go into physical therapy? Or do I want to go into alternative medicine, complementary alternative medicine now, as we call it? And so I actually took my MCATs, got accepted, or I passed them, didn't get accepted. I passed my MCATs, but I didn't have any really formal training in anything. I didn't have a BA. I still don't have one, never anything like that. And so even though I had passed the exam, I would have had a lot of catch-up education to go to medical school. And then I remember also thinking, I don't really necessarily like the way the medicine worked in Colorado. I'm not a big fan of the healthcare system and how it works. And so I decided, okay, well, I don't want to go into medicine, which led me down to the road. I'd had a significant soccer injury in 2021 that had ended my potential for a professional career. And I remember I had a PT here in Quebec where I got hurt. She was really good, and I found the work she did very enlightening and entertaining, and I really liked it. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll go into physical therapy. And then when I saw how the billing system worked with insurance and protocols, I decided, oh, that's also not necessarily what I want to do. I don't want to be stuck into a restrictive system. So then I decided massage school, and it was really at the behest of my wife who encouraged me to do it. And it was literally one day to the next. I literally just said, oh yeah, I'll go to massage school. Signed up on a whim. And here, 25 years later, and I'm still doing that.
Very interesting. A lot of there that I want to pick apart piece by piece, Troy. Well, first, since we're circling this anyway, I want to know Quebec, Colorado. Are you a dual citizen of the US and
Yeah,
Canada?
so I was born in New Mexico, but at a very young age, we came to live in Quebec, and it's definitely my identity is that of a Quebecer. It's funny, it would have been the elbows up moment. Quebecers identify themselves as Canadians, but historically we identify ourselves as Quebecers. Even if we are Canadians, we absolutely are. It's 100% part of Canada, but it would be like saying you're from Arkansas, not from the United States, or you're a Minnesotan instead of from the US. And then when I moved back to Colorado, that was also on a whim. I was actually in school. Something happened in college where I found I was not fit to do the job as a 19-year-old. I was like, this isn't going to be for me. I don't think I'm going to be good enough for this. Or as a 21-year-old, sorry. And so I decided that day I was going to quit college, even though I was 3 months away from graduating. Still a silly move. And that night, I contacted somebody in Colorado, Dr. Marcy Foley, who was one of the authors behind some of the Young Living manuals and books behind the chemical constituents of essential oils, which I was really much into at the time. And I called her and I said, hey, any chance you need help? I'd be really interested in learning from you. And she said, yes, absolutely. We need an employee. So I got a job in Boulder, Colorado. The next morning or afternoon, my brother called me and he said, hey, I met a girl. I'm going to move to Colorado to see where it goes. When you're done school, if you want to come out here, we would love to have you. We need a roommate. It'd be fun. Let's hang out. I said, hey, that's really crazy. Literally yesterday, I decided to drop out of school and I got a job in Boulder. And so it was kind of like stars aligning moment. It was kind of like not ordained or destined. I'm not a big fan of those ideas, but it definitely seemed to be easy. And so October 2022, moved out to Colorado, and that was kind of it. And then for a couple of years, goofed off. I was a bagel baker. I worked as a bartender at a wedding for a wedding venue, things like that, back and forth.
Cool. The next thing, Quebec, I was doing just a brief bit of very surface level digging. Parlez-vous français?
Absolument. Perfectly bilingual. I've lived in France for several years with my wife. My mother's from France. My wife is from France. Today's Monday, so this evening when I pick up my daughters, it'll be French day. We do French Wednesday, Friday only, and then the rest of the week is English, including homework. Perfectly bilingual.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, and I'm jealous. I'm really jealous. That's awesome. Okay, cool. Talk to me a little bit about, you say your father was involved, not in perhaps not in a systematic way, but as a massage therapist, particularly in work as shamanism, indigenous culture there. Can you speak a little bit of what that was like growing up with that? Did you have any I don't know, I guess what did you think about that as a child?
Yeah, at the time I didn't know this, but now I know that Quebec is unregulated for massage therapy, which is interesting because much of Canada is not that way. Like in Ontario, Alberta, British Columbia, I think Nova Scotia as well. Like regulations or New Brunswick, one of the two. Regulations and PEI are quite intense. 2,000 hours is the equivalent to a mastery program. Like it's a lot of work in order to be part of the healthcare system because we are public here, and so massage is part of. Like I get most of my clients are paid for through their insurance. Very little is private, some is, but most of it is paid for as part of the healthcare system. And, we have therapists in hospitals and things like that, and it's fully integrated, but it's still not legal, not regulated. In order to be part of the system, you have to belong to an association, and the associations have requirements like minimum education, minimum teaching, things like that. So it's regulated through the associations, but not through the government. And so when I was young, I didn't know any of this. And my dad did massage. And I just thought this was what you did. But it was very much similar, unregulated. So he could kind of do what he wanted. Now, there are major pros and cons to that, as anybody who's even relatively intelligent and can think through one thought to another would understand that an unregulated system has incredible risk and potential reward. You could really give somebody out of scope advice that might save them completely and might really help them, but you could also do the exact same thing and completely mess them up. And so pros and cons behind the regulation component there. And so my father, being more in the spiritual component, he's a spiritualist. He's a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, who is the author of the autobiography of a yogi, and he's a recognized disciple with them and things like that. Being a spiritualist was part of my life, essentially, even to this day. You know, growing up and meditating at a young age of 6 was not bizarre to us. My father, having roots in indigenous culture, being partially indigenous himself, he was a firekeeper for them and a storyteller for them for quite a while. And so at a young age, we would do, I would say in my early teenage years, it wasn't uncommon for us to build, essentially go out in the woods, take out some pine boughs and build a hut for essentially a steam. And we'd dig a turtle in the ground with some stones, and we'd heat the stones up with a fire throughout the entire day. We'll build the hut around it. We'd swim in the pond, even in the cold weather, and then go and do a sweat in a sweat lodge. And there was often meditation around it and sage breathing and experiences around it that were very profound for us. Even though I definitely don't look it, that's very much part of my culture. Even though I'm pretty white here, it's very much part of my culture, having grown up with that. And so the idea of shamanism and energy work and having this healer, we'll give it the title of official healer, was not foreign to me. And when I first started massage school, I very much mentally had the intent of this was the route I was going to go down, having come from Reiki and energy work and things and meditation for most of my life. And it was interesting because the more I stayed in massage school, and since then, I've actually, I would say, done a full 180 and gone in the opposite direction. And I detest the term healer, and I wouldn't be dead. I wouldn't be caught dead being called that. It would hurt me to be called that, because it takes on a response in my mind, my contextual box. It has a role of responsibility that I'm uncomfortable with when the responsibility is on the client. And that I would say guide is a better term than healer. And so it's interesting how I first went into it with this passion of this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to help others. And now I'm almost of the opposite thought process, where it's like, I don't help anybody. Like, you all help yourselves. Like, we're all here. We're all just doing our best. Good luck every day. The healer component, it's been interesting too, because I see it when I, like you said, I ran education in Colorado for a while for the AMTA, and I still travel the convention circuits, and I still teach a lot. I think I'm teaching 26 times this year alone, or traveling 26 times for teaching. And I still occasionally come across that dynamic of the healer at the front of the room and the student or disciple sitting in the room listening. It still gets to me. There's still a component there of disease and discomfort with it that is my own cross to bear, but definitely something that when I do see it, it gets to me a little bit. So it's been an interesting way of shaping my current self.
Yeah, thanks for going a little bit more in depth on that, Troy. I'm going to go ahead and jump us into your early days in massage school. Which school did you attend, and what was that like?
I went to the Boulder College of Massage Therapy, which at the time was essentially one of the biggest and best programs out there. Unfortunately, it has had folded since then, but it actually is being reopened, which is really cool. And I'm actually on the board of directors. I'm the president of the board of directors for the Boulder School of Massage Therapy now. And Krista DeGarza is the owner and executive director. She's the one who turned it into a nonprofit, bought the curriculum. And we're actually in the process right now of getting it up and running again, which is really awesome, because it feels like going back to my roots a little bit to be bringing that school back up. That school for me was beautiful. It was amazing. I mean, we had a good class. We had 26 students. We graduated with 23. We did a 1,000-hour program, and then we had an optional AOS for another 200 hours. We had this beautiful class called Anatomicon, which I think was one of my favorite ones, which was you got this like 1.5 foot tall doll made out of plastic, and it was the bony structures of the body. And then you got all this different colored clay, and you would build the human body from the inside out. And, like I think 3 or 4 years ago, I actually ended up teaching for this organization, Anatomy and Clay. And I got to know the owner quite well. He was on one of my podcasts on around a concept called the evolution of pain, because he knows a lot about evolutionary biology. Yeah, it was a little bit of a full circle for me. And that was one of my favorite classes. And the teacher, Michelle Howard, she was absolutely mind-blowingly good. She was humble and amazing and wonderful. And one of the other educators there, Elaine Calenda, who passed away, but who was absolutely amazing. She's former president of the AMTA, former continuing education director or educator. She was amazing. She influenced so many therapists, and I was lucky that she took me under her wing a little bit. And this was at the end of Bob King's life and teaching career, but she actually took me under her wing and introduced me to Bob King and had me become one of his teaching assistants, which, like I was young. I mean, I was a year out of school when that happened. I was 25 years old. I'd just been a new graduate. And that experience was amazing. And some of those students I'm still in touch with, which I love, 25 years later. It's still amazing to be in touch with some of them. I had one in one of my classes last year, which was really cool. Yeah, it was, we had this one class I remember in pathology, which I still use this. There's two things that I still use, even in my classes. The first was I never remembered how to talk about knock-kneed or bow-legged. I remembered them in those terms, but I never remembered their Latin names. It was one of those things that didn't go into my ADHD brain. And I remember we came up with a song, and it was Genu val gum, gum keeps your legs together. Genu ver rum, rum doesn't keep your legs together. And I remember that forever. Okay. Bow-legged verum, valgum, knock-kneed, the gum and rum component. That was always one of the ones. And then the other one we did, which was a really funny, as the cohort that we were really into Bob Iger, who was this writer at the time who did writings about pirates. And so in our pathology class, we decided that as a group, we were going to come up with mythal or make up pathologies that had to do with pirates specifically, and then have to essentially name, the muscles involved, the ligaments, the structures involved, and then how you would treat them. So we had like one-eyed pirate syndrome, which was ocular, for having lost an eye, and how they would have torticollis. We had parrot shoulder instead of frozen shoulder. We had peg limb syndrome for people who had been amputated and all the stuff that would go on with that. We had a scurvy tongue, and how you would treat intraoral. Like, we had all these different terms. And I still remember a lot of those projects because they were pretty profound. And I really think the cohort we had this ability to bring a sense of laughter and comedy into a lot of education. And yeah, so some of those people, they still mean a lot to me, even this many years later.
Yeah, for sure. So to this day, do you start to think of your clients in terms of like that pirate terminology?
Oh, well, I'm a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm supposed to play tonight. I still play with a group that I've been playing with for 24 years. They still live in Colorado. We play online now. And I will frequently think about some of my clients in non-pirate, sometimes pirate, sometimes, oh, that looks like a bad sword wound, when it's really just, like it's they fell and they hurt themselves from a scar or something like that, a bike accident, whatever it is. Yeah, absolutely. My brain still goes, I don't talk about it with my clients so much, but my brain definitely correlates it.
Let me ask you, what time was this that you were at the Boulder school?
2004 is when I went. I graduated, I think it was January 4th, 2005, something like that, whatever it was.
Okay.
Or right before the holidays. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Did you have any sort of preconceived notions about what massage therapy education would look like given your past? It sounds like a lot of introduction in your early days before going to school would have been in that more energy-based and more shamanistic, like you talked about. Was there a reckoning that had to happen?
It wasn't a reckoning. It was more an eye-opening, but it wasn't a reckoning. I was happy to see it. I thought all massage was that. I thought that's what massage was. I thought the historical premise of massage, and not just, sure, I thought that because I was exposed to it through my father, but like, I lived at an ashram and we used to give each other massage all the time when I was 16. I moved to Oregon and I lived at an ashram, and massage was, my brothers and my friends and I used to give each other massage all the time as kids. And for me, it was always just a way of creating, I mean, I guess the common term you would say a bromance, but to me, it would be healthy touch, consensual touch, permission-based touch. Of same sex or not, didn't matter. It was touch that was enjoyable between two humans. And for me, that's always what massage was. It was not what we see it as nowadays. And it's not everyone who sees it this way. So I know that'll rub some of the listeners wrong because some of them won't see it this way, and that's fine. But for the majority, being an educator now, and speaking to so many students around the year and around the globe, teaching internationally, it's obvious to me that what massage therapy is now, culturally, for better or for worse, not even thinking of that, is medical. It's partially for relaxation, but it is primarily for therapeutic. The majority of therapy is made to fix something. And that something it might be fixing might be stress, therefore relaxation is the treatment. But it might be low back pain. It might be pain treatment of some version. But that's how we see massage now. That's not when I went to massage school. That's not what I thought massage did. I didn't think massage helped with pain. I thought massage helped with mindfulness and awareness of the self and consciousness and being present. That and non-sexualized touch. That's for me what massage was growing up. And so when I went to massage school and I got introduced into the neuromuscular programs and the orthopedic programs, my mind kind of went, oh my God, it can be all these things too. But that's very much a modern, I would say, last 200 years, maybe 300 years, ever since Ambrose Paré, understanding of what massage is. But historically, if you think about massage in most cultures, it wasn't, that was what physicians did. Physicians moved joints and massaged tissue, and they also did things like bloodletting and leeches. There were other stuff that they did, but they looked at the body through logic and science, and that was what physicians did. But historically, I wouldn't say that's what massage therapists did. Massage therapists offered sometimes sexualized, but primarily non-sexualized touch, and depending on the culture you were in there. You go back to like Greek times and Roman times, and massage was to relax the muscles and relax the mind. And that was it. It wasn't about fixing aches and pains. It wasn't about doing other things. If you go back to Thailand a long time ago, I was just in Thailand teaching last year, and the host that I had, he was saying that in Thailand, massage, historically wasn't therapeutic in nature when it comes to the physical body. It was therapeutic in that it was designed to create a balance between soul, spirit, and body. And so it's just interesting how it wouldn't have been a reckoning. It was more of it's so much more than I thought it was. And I would say that what most people see as massage nowadays, or massage therapy, is probably very different from what historically has been present through humanity.
All right, Troy, and then talk to me about what completing that program kind of looked like for you. Did you end up getting a Colorado license at the time?
Yeah, so I actually still hold a Colorado license. I got one there. I've had it for 20 years, 21 years now, whatever that is. I maintained a Colorado license because even when I lived in France for 2010 and 11, I would travel back to the US quite often and do massage on people. And even now I do, like I'll be in Colorado in April and I'll see some of my former clients and I'll treat them. So I still maintain a license. And it's been a long time. I remember one of my favorite things to do after having graduated was, I'm a big Montreal Canadiens fan, big hockey fan. And so I would listen to the radio, and at the time it was CJAD, and it would be at 5 p.m. on average because of the time zone change to Montreal. And I'd have clients who want to come see me at 5 p.m. So I would tell them, I said, hey, if you come 5 p.m. on a hockey night, we're listening to the hockey game during the session. And I had a couple clients who said, yeah, that's fine. We don't really care what we listen to. And so they started listening to the hockey game. And I had a couple clients begin to only schedule sessions during hockey games. And to this day, 20 plus years later, they're still fans of the Montreal Canadiens only because we listen to them in the game. They've never been to Canada. They've never been to Quebec. They live in Colorado. They've only ever been there. And they've become massive Canadiens fans only because we listen to them, every single session, because they would schedule 5 p.m. Through, roughly half the year. It was interesting. So I became self-employed right away, started a clinic right away on my own. I also was hired out of school to work at a gym called the Flatirons Athletic Club. Now I think it's called the Colorado Athletic Club. And I was lucky to work there. Working there was, it was a very high-end gym, a lot of world champions in like the Ironman competition levels, a lot of professional cyclists, like part of the team for Team Slipstream, which was one of the Tour de France teams for a while. Part of them were based out of there and training there. And so I got to know a lot of the trainers, got to know a lot of the staff, got to know a lot of the athletes. And that encouraged me to go down the sports route. But I had already started that. When I was in massage school, I'd set up an internship working at a local indoor sports club, working for a professional sports team, the Colorado Rapid Development Program, their under 23 team, who I became a therapist for after graduating. Yeah, that became very much like the progression into sports. And that was where I sought most of my clientele, primarily out of that as well.
I'm curious, Troy, as you're bringing up an intense focus on sports massage, I'm wondering if, and it could be both or one more than the other, do you feel like your background and wanting to be a soccer professional player or being introduced to Bob King before his passing, do you feel like either one of those two played a big part in following through with more sports massage related education at the time?
Absolutely. I mean, I was young at the time. I was in my early 20s, and sports was everything to me. I wanted to play soccer professionally, and when I got hurt, it was brutally devastating. But I would say my understanding now of the human body is one that would say how ridiculous of me. At the time, I thought, oh, athletes are different. They're not. They're not different. I mean, and any athlete who likes to think they're different, good for you, man. I've worked with, like I've worked with some of the highest paid athletes in the world, and doesn't mean that they're different. It just means that they get paid to do what we want to do for fun, and that they have to focus so much on that they have to essentially optimize their time. Most people don't get optimize their time for physical activity, and so it shifted my focus when I first graduated because that was my passion was. But throughout time in the profession now, 20 years later, what it made me realize was most humans and athletes, anatomy and physiology doesn't behave differently. If you get a bacterial infection and you're an athlete and you're not an athlete, the body does the same thing. One might do it more efficiently because they're in a better health state. Their homeostasis is at a more perfect level. The other person may not. Maybe they have bigger health concerns, but the body's still trying to do the same thing. And when I was younger in my career, I definitely didn't think that. I thought, oh, athletes have this, like gold level standard. And it's, and the more you get into it, the more you realize, oh, all the research it's done on athletes. So you hear, oh, athletes, and it puts them on this pedestal. Well, yeah, the research is done on athletes because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
It's not because they're on a pedestal. And it took me a long time mentally to understand that everything I did, it's one of my cruxes to bear when it comes to things like sports massage. Sports massage, true sports massage, is around an event before and after. Outside of that, you're just doing massage. You might be doing it on a sports person, but if that person wasn't into sports, would you do anything differently? Like if they both came in with bursitis of the hip, would you do it differently because they're an athlete? No, you would recommend the same things. The difference is the athlete might be more compliant. They might do their exercises, they might participate, they might have a higher threshold for pain, but the actual body's trying to do the same thing. And when I started, I didn't think that. And it took time for me to understand that, oh, a lot of the reasons we have these athletes on a pedestal thinking that their bodies do bigger, better, stronger things is because, oh, they have time to isolate. They have time to concentrate on these disciplines. They have time to pay for recovery. I mean, if you're an athlete, recovery is part of your training, but the actual body is just the same. It's just at what level is it tuned, essentially.
As you're saying all of this, Troy, my mind can't help but think, kind of like in your case, what a blessing to have that realization as early as you did. Is that fair to say that, Troy? Because some people, maybe you're going through their massage career and still haven't realized that.
I've been very lucky with the people who I've had in my life. Speaking of Elaine and Bob, I am not 100% sure why this happens. I think I have an idea. It comes probably from arrogance and lack of shame more than anything else. But I'm willing to approach anyone and speak to them. And sometimes I've done that and absolutely been put my foot in my mouth 100% and looked like an absolute imbecile. And other times I've done it and I've created beautifully long lasting relationships. And a good example is, Dr. Kenzo Kase, the founder and creator of Kinesiology Tape and the company Kinesio Tape, who I still work for. I met him very early on in 2010. A lot of people who have met before he passed away, Dr. Kase, were very intimidated by his presence and about his knowledge because he was a very intelligent man and very, very gifted therapist, very, very gifted with how he uses hands. And again, be it arrogance and lack of shame or stupidity, who knows? I was happy to just go up to him and introduce myself and start talking to him. But from it stemmed a beautiful relationship. And I learned a lot from him about the human body and its essentially its given state. And it's the same. Recently, I've had that opportunity last year with Lorimer Mosley. I had the opportunity to get to know him over the course of 3 days. We were in a class with a whole bunch of other students, but I got to know him quite well, even out of it, to the point where we communicate now. And again, that's another resource where his understanding of the human body and how pain behaves in the body has really expanded mine. And I've had that relationship with Benny Vaughn and just blah blah blah, the therapist after therapist. But the thing is it's been a gift to get this wisdom given to me by other people. And there's a famous saying, essentially, learn from your elders, and a lot of people have a hard time learning from their elders because it's not a personalized experience. But even at a young age, I really thought, hey, I should learn from my elders. If enough elders are saying this thing, maybe they have a point. So instead of learning it the hard way and then going, they had a point, why don't you just accept it as truth and live that way and see if it's confirmed? And if it's not confirmed, you can always do something different. And so when a lot of these really influential therapists, when I had the opportunity to interact with them and get to know them very well and intimately, Tina Allen is another one who, pediatric specialist from Little Kids Foundations, who just the influence from these people and the humbleness that they have, bringing them forward and speaking to me and passing on their wisdom. I just spent most of my career trying to sit there and say, thank you, I believe you. Thank you, I believe you. Not about the science. People who have taken my class will know that I'm a big fan of doubting science. Not doubting science, but doubting given facts like fascia works or blah, 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 blah. I'm a big fan of believing experience and wisdom. And if someone says, hey, try not to do more 20 sessions a week, maybe you should listen to them. Maybe if every therapist out there is kind of saying, hey, a good number is about 20 a week, you don't get burned out, you can do it a long time, financially it's sustainable, you're welcome to go and try 30 or 40 a week. But maybe there's a totality of experiences that's coming forward generationally there. And you should say, I'm willing to hear it. I think I've been fortunate with the mentors I've had in my life and the influences I've had in my life, and that they've helped guide me to say, hey, just don't learn it the hard way if you don't have to. If you want to, you're welcome to it. But we're here if you don't want to.
Awesome. I love that. I want to open a conversation to how you got into education, but before we get there, I just have to ask, Boulder, Colorado, home base of the ABMP. I know you've had a lot of experience with the AMTA. Were you introduced to ABMP first because they were right there in your backyard?
No, I mean, Boulder College of Massage Therapy was an AMTA affiliated school, right? So like most students, I don't know if you know this, Kirby, but not everybody who graduates school is interested in association and governance. Sure. Most people who graduate from school are interested in finance and paying rent. And so, unlike some of us. And so, when I graduated, I didn't care. I had an association. It was my liability insurance. And that was the totality of my interest all the way up until 2016. Like for 12 years, I did not care. It could have been Farmers State Insurance for all I care. Like it didn't mean anything to me. So I graduated, from an AMTA school, and I just kept that going. That was it. And to be honest, I didn't even know anything else existed. I had no idea that there were several associations. I wasn't aware of that stuff. But let's also go back 20 years now and think, okay, well, yes, email was around, but was it used as much? No. The internet was around, but was easy access to internet search? No, I used to remember going to internet cafes. So having tons of websites and podcasts and social media, this stuff didn't exist to its current manifestation. So knowing about other associations was, you had to look for them as opposed to having them come across your feed, essentially. So I didn't know any of that. I didn't know that any of that other stuff existed.
Gotcha. I think you might be my first guest that's have any experience with Colorado. Maybe I should say is the way to phrase that. Troy, which did come first, working with the association or becoming an educator?
Becoming an educator.
Okay.
It started for me with in 2010 when I met Dr. Kase. I had already started TAing with Bob, and I'd already developed an interest in it, but I was like, I'm not ready yet. And then I got involved with the Kinesiotaping Association. I became an instructor for them. I started in 2010 2010 TAing, and then I became an instructor in 2012. And I've been teaching for them ever since, and I still do teach for them. And the more I started teaching for them, at the same time in 2012, I came across Paul Ingram's website, painscience.com. And since then, I've gotten to know Paul quite well. He's going to be one of my future, we've recorded a podcast, it's not up yet. He's helped me with a lot of my class designs. I've written him about a lot of feedback. And Paul's website kind of broke me. I had a big crisis of faith moment because the first big thing I read of his was about myofascial release and trigger points. And if you guys aren't familiar with it, I recommend it. I also recommend bracing yourself, like have a strong cup of coffee. Like it is a kick in the head to our profession. And it's absolutely necessary. For me, at the time, the way I was teaching was still very much what most people teach nowadays, and still very much part of how people teach, which is this structural method behind physiology. We call it the biomedical model. And it dates to the 60s and 50s and 60s, really. The biomedical model has been shown that in the acute phases and subacute phases of injury is very, very valuable. You break a bone, you should probably set it. You dislocate a shoulder, you should probably put it back in place. You tear a ligament, you should probably let it heal. There are very clear-cut biomedical structures that need repair. Anything moving into the chronic or rehabilitative phase beyond 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, the biomedical model starts to fall apart. But a lot of the classes we take, a lot of the educators out there, still teach a biomedical model for chronic discomfort. And the body just doesn't behave that way. We just see this more and more. And when I came across Paul's websites and his blogs and started listening to what he was reading, I really had this crisis of faith moment, because I used to teach, I used to treat primarily myofascial release. That was my bread and butter. And then I remember reading, oh, we can't deform fascia? Like we're not strong enough to deform fascia? What do you mean? Like I've been lying to my clients? And then, I read his trigger point stuff, and it's really well researched, and it's good research, and doesn't mean trigger points don't exist. It just means we're less adept at finding them than we think we are. And that's the foundation of neuromuscular therapy. And that was part of what I did too. And so to sit there and say, wait a minute, I've been lying to my clients from the beginning of my career for 7 years now, I feel bad. And I had this crisis of faith moment, and I almost left the profession. But instead, I chose to stick around, and I just decided to redesign my practice. So I stopped saying I'm doing myofascial release. I stopped saying I'm doing neuromuscular therapy. And I just said, we're going to treat discomfort, and I stopped trying to use definitions of what I was doing, which became hard marketing wise, but worth it in the long run. From that, it made me want to teach stuff like that because I was still getting the results. So the results were there in the clinic, but I technically treating fascia, even though that's what I was told I was doing. I wasn't treating trigger points, even though that's what I was told I was doing. And yet the results were still present. So I started going, well, then what is happening? And when I started looking at what is happening, that's when I started looking at, Andrew Lau and Dave Butler and Lorimer Mosley and stuff outside of massage therapy sometimes, and sometimes within massage therapy. I started looking at a lot of educators who were talking about the human body in a different way, which has become much more common now, but at the time very much wasn't. And that got me passionate about teaching an understanding of the human body that's not founded on structuralism, but is founded instead on the client's experience of discomfort, relief, joy, all those kinds of components.
It sounds pretty avant-garde and cutting edge, Troy. If nothing else, it sounds like it's a complete and total paradigm shift is essentially what you were experiencing there. And I'm wondering if you moved from structural into a more client experience model, is that where the sensory comes in?
Yeah, so my theory started with essentially, I had this kid in my office. I remember it was this 7-year-old child, and I was working on them. They had torticollis, and I was working on them. And at 26 minutes, the kid said, "Hey, I got nothing." I was like, "Sweet, wonderful." But they'd booked an hour, still got 30, or I got roughly 30 minutes left to finish this. At minute 27, all his symptoms came back. And I remember thinking, what did I do? I didn't traction suddenly. I didn't stretch more aggressively than I had been. I didn't treat deeper. I didn't treat faster. I literally was doing the same thing for 26 minutes as I was for 27 minutes. That 27th minute, symptoms came back 1 minute later. And I remember eventually having this realization, because I was racking my brain over what did I do? And I had this realization of, oh, I just touched them longer. I did the same thing, but I touched them longer. And eventually their nervous system just kind of said, I'm out. I don't like this anymore. And what I know now, which I didn't know at the time, that his nervous system probably went from I'm happy to I'm overwhelmed. And in the overwhelmed state, it probably went into a fight, flight, freeze response, or, which is a little extreme, we would just say a vigilance or threat perception response. And that because the vigilance and threat was there, the most likely outcome was what we would call caloric efficiency learning and habituation, which is his calorically efficient response to being overwhelmed would have been to replicate a behavior that has historically protected him, which would have been torticollis. Because with the pain as a manifestation, you can ignore anxiety. You can say, I'll get rid of it later. You can be impatient and say, I'll calm down tonight. You can be confused and just say, oh, I got to concentrate harder. All of those like subtle alarm signs you can kind of ignore, but pain is one of those ones that you can't ignore. Pain will just say, you want to ignore me? I'll just hurt you more. And at one point, you will pay attention to me. And when you pay attention to me, you will change your environment. You will do something different so that you have less pain, be it take medication, be it isolation, be it activate, whatever it happens to be. And so at the time, I didn't know this, but now my thought process would have been, oh, we touched him too long. That created a vigilance response, which created threat perception or pain. And that there stimulated the most calorically efficient response, which was habituated symptoms, and those symptoms were torticollis for him, and that's why his symptoms came back. At the time, I remember just thinking, what did I do wrong? Through that experience, it made me realize that had I been paying attention to the client more, which I thought I was doing, had I been paying attention more, his sensory system, it was giving me cues, subtle but present, of I've had enough. One good example of that would have been they're on the table, he'd been quiet for 25 minutes. And then he started talking, but nothing else had changed. That's a sign of his nervous system saying, I'm agitated. The same as a system that sits there and goes, I'm talking, and then I'm quiet or fall asleep. And as a massage therapist, most people say, oh, great, fantastic, I got them to relax. No, you didn't. You got them to disassociate. And that's not the same. And disassociation is not a good response. That is a overwhelmed response. You want them to slowly calm down, not go chatty, asleep. That would be a sensory response of saying overwhelmed, a too much stimulus kind of thing. Sweat responses, twitches, anxiety. There's all these subtle and honestly not that subtle anymore. And so it made me start thinking, okay, the sensory system really should be dictating what version of touch I give a client. And so I happen to be pretty severe ADHD and I have very high tone. So when people treat me, because I have high tone, not high muscle tone, high skin tone, my skin tone is quite like I'm not very elastic in nature. In my skin, people think I want deep, but I don't. I want to be back scratched. And most people who are high tone, in the beginning of the session, they want deep pressure and broad surfaces to feel safe. But the moment they feel safe, they actually just want the softest, like feathery back scratch. And honestly, if like I'm in pain, I'll just lay on my bed and have my wife or my children give me a back scratch, and that'll help my pain far more than massage does. Now, if you're someone with low tone, it's almost the opposite. You start the session off soft because the body doesn't have this resistance to it. But as you go in with depth, they appreciate that stimulus, that version of almost like a deep hug and a deep stimulus almost more. And then there's the most humans who sit in the middle of that spectrum who kind of just don't care. They go back and forth depending on need. And so the more I started digging into the sensory system, the more I realized, oh, similar to humans being neurodivergent, some needing overstimulus and some needing less stimulus, and some having poor time management and some having time blindness and some being hyperfixated on it. We're all different. We all need different variations of reality. That's just pretty much the same. I started moving away from this idea of a 60-minute session to a sensory-based system, which is when your body says the session's over, be it 5 minutes in or an hour in, session's over. You still owe me the same amount of money, by the way. Session is session, but you're not going to always get an hour because if your nervous system starts saying you're done and I treat you more, your symptoms are just going to come back or we're going to elicit a new response in your body that may not be beneficial. And so that's really where I started moving towards the sensory system. And that's morphed into more neuroscience, which is what I teach now, a lot of the neuroscience of touch therapy, but it's still very much grounded in the sensory system.
Correct my timeline if I've got this wrong. Were you living in France at this time when you were kind of following these paths and learning these different things?
No, I came back. So I had been in France in 2010 and 11, and then I moved back to Colorado in 2012.
Were you working as a massage therapist in France?
No and yes at the same time. I was partially retired. So I wanted to, but licensing in France was very different, and I didn't want to go through the process, to be honest. And I was closer to what they would call a kiné, which I guess would be a kinesiologist, but it's not quite the same. And I didn't want to go through that process, to be honest. And I had a job. I worked with a professional cycling team. I worked with Trek Factory Racing at the time. And so from mid to late February to early September, I wasn't really in France. I would travel somewhere in the world with a cycling team. We would do the World Cup circuit and, looking to qualify for the Olympics and looking to qualify for world championships and place well in them and try to win. And, we were a professional team. That's all we did. And so we would go, South Africa and Australia and all over Europe and all over North America racing bikes. And I was a therapist. And then I'd come home for 2 or 3 weeks and then go back on the road and come home for 2 or 3 days and go back on the road and partially be based out of Colorado when we did a big stint in North America and then based out of Europe and for everything else. And then from essentially mid-September through mid-February, I just rode my bike 4 or 5 days a week. Didn't really do I helped people work I helped a guy build his house. I did stonework. I helped pick grapes. That was about it.
Back to 2012, learning all of this new stuff. When did you really do this massive overhaul of your education programs that you were providing?
So in 2012 is when I changed my clinic. And then in 2018, I decided to teach my own class for the first time ever. So between 2010, when I started teaching with Kinesio, and 2018, I only taught for kinesiotaping. And during that time, I was amassing all this information and trying to essentially put it together. And honestly, I was having a hard time because sometimes, kinesiotaping is a standardized curriculum around the world. And I still teach that stuff. And sometimes I'd be teaching it and going, I'm starting to disbelieve a little bit about what I'm teaching. And since then, I have found ways to tie it all together so it makes more sense. But at the time, I remember thinking like I'm having a hard time teaching upper cross syndrome as an example, or anterior pelvic tilt as your problem. I'm having I still have a hard time with postural analysis, not because it's not something I used to do, but because the science shows us it's a very outdated assessment tool, and that more often than not, posture is the result of pain, not pain the result of posture. And so I accumulated all this information for a while, and really at the push of my wife, which was bless her for it, really started teaching my own stuff in 2018. Which happened to also be the year that we had a newborn. We had a 5-year-old. We had a newborn born in March. And March 22nd, she was born. April 8th, we decided to leave the country and move to Canada. May 1st, our house was put on the market. May 4th, it was purchased. May 28th, they moved. And July 1st, I taught my first class. So it was a very stressful period of time. And then July 4th, after teaching, I drove across the country and across the border with a truck with our stuff in it and moved permanently in 2018. And so I started teaching my own material in 2018, the year I moved out of the US. And since then, the class has evolved enormously as more research comes out. And as I've had the ability to I did some recently with the university here near my house, and it's changed my understanding as well. But now it's very different. And I have the opportunity to explore much more and go down rabbit holes. And so since then, I started with what I called the sensory approach to manual therapy, but people didn't know what that really meant when I took class. So then I changed the title to How Massage Therapy Works, which sounded too introductory, but it truly was how massage, it really is why it's effective, but it was too introductory of a title. So now it's called the Neuroscience of Massage Therapy. And it introduced essentially different components about why a massage session is effective, why one client will walk in with you and walk away with results, and why that client could go see a different therapist and also get results, or they could go to a different therapist, get quote unquote the same massage. And when I mean that, that's very, it's like saying it's the same house. It's in a different location, it's in a different climate, but might be the same blueprint. So you might be doing roughly the same blueprint, but there are nuances behind it that's different. For me, the neuroscience of massage, which is really where my passion lies now, is those nuances matter. The fact that you're a male, female therapist, that plays into instantly the unconscious box of, am I going to like this session or not? The fact that you're in a basement or on a first floor, the fact that they get a parking lot or not, the fact that they're late or not, the fact that you look groomed or not, the fact that you look like you're in, gym clothing, workout clothing. This is the profession. Like, I came from clinic today. I wear button ups the whole time. That all plays into it. So those nuances now matter. And that for me is really where I spend most of my time educating now, which is, hey, the nuances are far more important than we think. And in all likelihood, probably where the results are, less the actual, I worked on this muscle specifically, therefore you got better. It's more, I worked on that area of your body, you felt safe with me, you allowed the work to create a transition, and that's why you got improvement and therefore are able to move better, because now you feel safe. Not because I got rid of a trigger point, not because I got rid of an adhesion. Those are really becoming outdated models. And you'd said earlier, a paradigm shift. It was for me, but I think the profession as a whole is going through this. In 2018, when I started teaching some of this stuff, I could list the number of educators who are talking like this on one hand.
Yeah.
And now I can't. Now there's more. There's far more. We're talking about the sensory system having this predominant impact on our overall health, how we behave, and not just here, internationally as well. We're seeing more and more educators talk about moving away from this idea that we are the reason somebody gets better. And instead, it's the context, the day, the preconceived notions. These play into much more of it, which some therapists take as an insult, because it means they go, well, I'm not as important. I take it the opposite way around. I look at it and go, oh, well, I can play with all these things then. I can wear a blue shirt to a session, or I can wear a red shirt, or I can wear a white shirt. I can put on fast music or calm music. I can have the blinds open or closed. I can have bright lights or low lights. Suddenly, the nuance behind what you do, wow, like that gives us such more potential to create change.
Opens more pathways, more doors, I guess.
The Society of Massage Archives invites you to join us for a virtual book club and discussion circle. A monthly 90-minute virtual deep dive into Dr. Patricia Benjamin's book, The Emergence of the Massage Therapy Profession in North America, A History in Archetypes. This isn't your typical book club. It's a conversation where we'll read the emergence chapter by chapter, reflect on the stories, struggles, and triumphs that shaped our profession, and explore how the past informs our current and future circumstances. Discussion circles are moderated by SOMA's Executive Board of Directors, with special guest hosts and Q&A sessions with the author, Dr. Benjamin. Registrants will receive access to the ebook format courtesy of Sutherland Chan School of Massage in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Virtual meetings will be held on the second Monday of each month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Central, 4:30 p.m. Mountain, and 3:30 p.m. Pacific. Visit our social media on Facebook and Instagram, or our website at societyofmassagearchives.org to learn more and get registered today. We'll see you soon.
Let me ask you, Troy, I'm curious, if you moved from a more structural-based approach to a more sensory-based approach, do you find like your background in Reiki, you mentioned essential oils earlier as well, sports massage, do you find those to be compatible with this sensory approach?
Yes and no. And it's such a good question, because it's definitely something I've had to debate on my own before. Yes, absolutely. And no, not at all. Definitely not. I think the question itself is slightly flawed, in that what we're dealing with is, I think, more a philosophical question, which I try to answer on a couple of my podcasts. Are we dealing with massage, or are you dealing with massage therapy?
Mm.
And most people wouldn't say that there's a difference. And I absolutely think there's a difference. And I think that difference really matters. And I think the difference would be, are you part of healthcare, or are you part of health and wellness? If you're part of health and wellness, then I think essential oils and energy work, and you can name a lot of other ones there. I don't necessarily care to name them all, but there are tons that would fall into the category of health and wellness. If we're in healthcare, medicinal healthcare covered in the system, private or public, insurance billed, working in hospitals, working in clinics, things like that, then same thing. There's a whole slew of names of modalities and techniques that would go in that category that wouldn't fit in the other. And I don't think the two cross. Now, does the human body cross? Absolutely. The human body goes back and forth. So I know a lot of massage therapists in the governance realm are trying to fit us into one of these categories or the other. And I used to be one of those people. And I'm coming to this place in my career now where I'm going, I kind of like not having that oversight. Like, it's kind of fun that in one session we can start with, oh, you've got plantar fasciitis? well, here's what we know about the pathology. Here are some exercises you can do. Let's go ahead and work it. And then it might transition into, while you're working their foot, they're suddenly dealing with a trauma that they remembered out of a crush injury from having, an accident. Like, we are a rarely blessed profession to have the ability to go back and forth between these two realities of what we would consider healthcare and what we would consider health and wellness. Not all professions get that level of freedom. I would say there are quite a few other professions who have the equal potential for those freedoms. Osteopathy, acupuncture, massage, chiropractic, physical therapy, just to name a few, yoga therapy, they all have these potentials. But many of them have a lot of oversight that don't allow you to go, their scope of practice is much more limiting. And so I do think that in a idealistic world, there's absolute overlap. There's a reason people like, Icy Hot or Tiger Balm. The smell reminds them of something. Biofreeze, Cryoderm, those odors, they remind people of a sports environment. So they think sports massage. There's a reason people like lavender. It is calming. Now, does it mean that it's so calming that it changes the dopamine levels in your brain and reduces cortisol? No, 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 no. But it doesn't mean it doesn't affect your olfactory bulb and cause a memory to be released that lets you go, ah. And now as you relax, that is a secondary effect, is the decrease in cortisol and stress. It's not from the oil, it's from the secondary effect. Let's say memory-based and contextual. Now that nuance between effect and secondary effects is really important in healthcare, because it's like when people say massage reduces stress. No, it doesn't. We have no mechanism that shows that massage reduces stress. What we do have is we have the potential to say, statistically, we see people who get massage are less stressed. Or sorry, massage reduces stress is the right sentence. It's when you hear the words massage reduces cortisol. Massage has no effect on cortisol. We do not have a clear line of mechanism of impact. What we do have is a clinical mechanism. Clinically, we know massage reduces stress. Mechanistically, meaning the biochemical changes inside the brain, hormonal changes, massage doesn't seem to have an impact on that. The impact could be if somebody laid in a room with calming music without touch, in a nap, in the middle of the day, would they have the same change? Possibly. So they would have a change in cortisol with or without the massage component. But we do know that massage seems to help with stress. And I think that's the same nuance with things like energy work, and the same thing with things like relaxation style massage versus things like sports massage versus essential oils. It doesn't really matter. Give it the name you want. But I think the bigger difference is more, are we saying that what we are doing is having a mechanical impact, or what we're doing is have a clinical impact? And clinically, we know massage is incredibly valuable, and let's stay there. Let's spend all of our energy commenting on that component because we're really good at that. And we have a large pool of data that shows clinically massage helps reduce non-specific chronic low back pain. We know massage helps reduce injuries and enhance sports recovery and make people feel safe, and consensual touch. And there are all these things, and it helps with trauma. Like we see all these amazing benefits of massage, and they're all clinical. And I think, who is it who wrote the 5 myths of massage therapy? I can't remember if it's Tracy Walton. I think it's Tracy Walton. Might have been Tiffany Field or Laura Allen. I think it's Tracy Walton. She wrote the 5 myths of massage therapy. And one of them was, we leapfrog back and forth between what we think of mechanistic outcomes versus clinical outcomes. The mechanistic outcome would be, again, there's a decrease in cortisol. The clinical outcome would be you're less stressed. Well, let's stick with the clinical outcomes because that's what we're really good at. Let's leave the mechanistic outcomes to high-end research because they need that. You need to be taking samples of urine or blood. You need to be taking samples of heart rate monitor, brainwave behavior. And honestly, like, there's a lot of money in that. And justifiably or unjustifiably so, why on earth would you spend money in massage therapy looking for brainwave behavior? I'm incredibly interested in the why of it. But when it comes to an MRI costing $100,000, why on earth would you spend it on something like massage therapy, which is low risk, high reward, compared to someone who has a brain tumor, which is high risk, low reward? Right. So justifiably, we don't have a lot of mechanistic research showing why massage therapy is great. Doesn't mean statistically we don't. So when it comes to things like oils, energy work versus sports versus therapeutic versus gua sha versus taping versus cupping, again, name it what you want. The truth is do they have a place together? Absolutely. But I think it comes down to Are you talking about your sessions in the term of overall healthcare of somebody and health and wellness? Or are you talking about medicine, their specific injury? In which case, now you do have to start separating the two. In the overall health and wellness, we get to stay open-minded. And I think there's greater value in it. There's higher risk, but there's also greater value.
I think that answer does a whole lot to illustrate your passion for nuance. Do you find, in my experience, people don't have much of a taste or an appetite for nuance? And I'm wondering if that is the same thing you experience in your classroom. Do you find this is a hard sell for most practitioners?
Uh, no, because they're in my classroom, but that's because they're in my classroom. Now, it's not always the case. I've had some who have a hard time grasping it, but most who take my classes, they're prepared. They've either heard it, they've either heard me through a podcast, or they've come across me. It doesn't hurt that it doesn't hurt that it's easy for me to stand in front of somebody and speak. I used to do professional theater before I went into massage, and I did auditions and stuff like that. And I did stand-up comedy for a couple of years. And so being able to stand in front of a group of people and be at ease and be comfortable instantly removes barriers.
Yeah.
And so when I stand in front of a group and say something, there's already a sense of ease and comfort. I think the hardest thing that most of my students have a hard time with is I stress this all the time, and I'll stress it to every one of you right now listening to this. If I say something, you should fact check me. You should 100% fact check. Like, for me, the amount of times I wish I would have fact checked my teachers. I just only would. I would not have had my crisis of faith in 2012 when coming across Paul Ingram's website. I would have had my crisis of faith while in school. To me, the amount of time I go through my career and I've come across I think the hardest time I actually have is not with students. The hardest time is with other educators. Yeah. And not all of them by any means whatsoever. But I've come across some educators who, like, they are firmly rooted in structuralism, because that's where their bread and butter is. That's where their reputation is. That's where all their course design comes from. And, being someone who does course design for a living for fun, it's not easy, and it is incredibly time consuming. I really think the people I have the hardest time with, and it's not about convincing them, because I could care less if they're convinced or not. To me, it's science is science. It doesn't care about your opinion. It is what it is. Like, say anything you want. Science will eventually come out and say true or not. Like that's kind of it. Ricky Gervais had this great bit. I think he was on the Colbert Show. I can't remember, where he said, and they were talking about God and science. And essentially it was like, you take every religion, every book, every church, burn it all, get rid of it all somehow. In 2,000 years, religion will be a different story. It might have similar characters, but it'll be a different story. You take all the universities and all the textbooks and all the physics and all the scientists, and you get rid of them all, you burn them all. In 2,000 years, the reason an airplane flies is still going to be the same reason an airplane flies. Like, those laws are irrefutable. And I think when it comes to the sensory system, when it comes to neuroscience, when it comes to how we interact with clients, we're learning more about the brain due to technology. And so up until now, past 15 or 20 years, a lot of the theories we've had in manual therapy have been founded on theory alone, because we didn't have technology to say yay or nay. And this ties in very much to, Soma, which is, I'm a big fan of standing on the shoulders of those who came before us and having learned from them. I'm not a big fan of carrying on the myths of those stories. I'm grateful I got to learn from people like Elaine and Bob, and I got to learn from all these incredible educators throughout time. And I've been taking classes with Benny and with Whitney and with Till and with Todd Hargrave and I mean, you name it, and James and James Wolslowski and Dalton and Tina and Laura Allen and on, and Ruth Warner, and on and on and on and on. All the names of all these incredible educators over time, Doug Nelson and all these people. And I'm grateful that I had the chance to learn from them. They created part of the foundation of who I am, but I'm also not willing to continue their stories as a given. And science now is showing that those stories are changing. Those theories are no longer accurate. It doesn't mean they weren't the best theory at the time. It means the story has changed, and we need to be willing to adapt. And I think the people who I have the hardest time with are those who teach this idea consciously or unconsciously, willingly or unwillingly changing. I know of some educators who I definitely have a hard time with, and I don't speak with, I don't spend time with, who intentionally are staying stuck there because it's where their money is. Yeah. And for me, I shame on them. And I'm not going to name anybody, obviously. There are others who are doing it because they don't know better. That's okay. Ignorance is bliss until you're not ignorant. And then it's not bliss anymore. And then there's a larger pool of therapists who are moving forward and pushing forward to adapt. Justin Solis, Matt Gave, Paul Colmer. There's Tina Allen. I can't stress how awesome she is. Tara Nicole. There's so many therapists nowadays who are moving their ideas forward into what could potentially be a new version of therapy. It's just going to be a matter of time, but eventually that idea will be essentially moved away, and we'll see it as a part of massage therapy history, and that the new version will be something that is more inclusive of the whole body as a person, including the sensory system and the neuroscience behind it, and the context and the nuance. So I don't see it as a problem with students, and I don't even see it as a problem with educators, to be honest. The only time I see a little bit of resistance is with educators, but not really with students. Even as a student, if I say something in class, you should. I cite my research papers in my class, and they should go read those papers. And in theory, is if you read all the papers that I cite in my class, and I think there's 183 of them. If you read all those papers, my theory is you'd walk away with the same idea. You would have created the class instead of me. But to this date, I know of only one student, Rachel Richards, who's actually read all of my papers that I cited in the class. And she came up essentially with similar ideas.
There you go. I'm just going to swallow everything that you're telling me, Troy, but
sorry, I see from some of the big eyes that some of the stuff is like, wait a minute, what?
No, I appreciate that. And thank you for, again, that last answer was full of nuance as well. So thank you for that. If we can shift just a little bit our focus, I want you to talk to me about getting involved with the national organizations, specifically the AMTA.
Yeah, so in 2013, I was still working with the professional cycling team, Track Factory Racing, and I had my first daughter. She was born. I really enjoyed the work with the cycling team. It was very much a family unit. We were 12 people who traveled the globe together for 6 months of the year. We roommate together. We would travel together. We'd play together, and we'd work together. And so we were very close knit. And be it for the good moments and the bad moments, we were very close knit. And so when my daughter was born, it was very hard to give up with essentially my second family. And so I tried a year on the circuit, and it was just too hard. It was too hard on me. It was too hard on my wife. And long term, I think it would have been too hard on my daughter. To be home alone and to have to, for my wife having to do everything from daycare to working to, for every time I wasn't home, and then come home and try to reintegrate into the pattern, but then 3 days later leaving. So in 2014, I decided not to continue on the cycling circuit, and I stayed home and did my clinic full time. And that was when I really started shifting into, I got to start teaching. And then 2 years later, as I was doing this, I got asked to teach the kinesiotaping class at the Colorado Spring or Fall Convention. I can't remember. In 2014 or 15, I can't remember which one. I got introduced to them in an official capacity, like I was teaching this time. And I was like, oh, these people are kind of cool. Oh, I didn't know this thing existed, kind of thing. I didn't know it was volunteer run. In 2016, I decided, I've taught classes and I've taught them on my own. I have my own registration website. I find the event. I find the venue. I find all that kind of stuff. And so I said, that's essentially event planning. That seems easy enough. So I ran for the position of educator, head of education, director of education for the AMTA in Colorado, and got it. And they were definitely scared because normally the person who runs that position, I know you've worked with AMTA in the past, I think, right? Normally the education person, it's a big role. It's a big responsibility to run the conventions. So they were a little nervous because they didn't know who I was. I'd interacted with one person once, and that was signing my contract when I taught for them. And so they were like, who is this person? Why are they board? And why do they have one of the biggest positions we have? But having had all that experience, having done it privately, it was an easy transition for me. And I really fell in love with the board. I had volunteered before. I used to volunteer for this organization called Above the Seas, which we delivered. We helped build libraries and deliver laptops and books in Kenya and Mogadishu primarily. And I'd volunteered when I was a younger person as at youth centers for troubled youth. So volunteering was always part of my experience, and this was a chance to come back to it. And I really enjoyed falling in love with the organization. For better or for worse, there are pros and cons about being with the AMTA. I'm still actually involved with them. I'm the membership director in Colorado still, even though I live primarily in Quebec, but I still have clients in Colorado and I still go back there often. For me, the more important thing wasn't the association. It could have been anything. For me, it was the volunteering that mattered. I firmly believe that as a human, if you care about something and you have the energy to spend, you should do something. That's it, full stop. And so for me, I care immensely about the human experience. I don't care, even though this is gonna be a weird one. Even though I teach massage, I don't actually care about massage. I care about the human experience of the person in the room.
Yeah.
That client who's coming to see me is spending their time and their money. And that interaction with them might be the most important part of their day. For you, it's just another client, but it might also be the most important part of your day. You do not know when the opportunity will show up to change you. You don't know the moment when something will happen which goes, I am better for what happened to me today. I feel like being involved with the AMTA has given me an opportunity, specifically because that's who I volunteer with, to really express that part of myself more and to give freely. And it's also why I've taken on the role of volunteer, as president of the Boulder School of Massage Therapy, which is a much more time consuming position than anything else I've done. It's essentially a full-time job almost, but it's the same thing. If you feel strongly about something, even mildly strongly about something, and you have energy, which I do, you should give. Absolutely, you should give. And I don't care if it's at a food center, food bank, if it's helping your neighbor walk their dog. I'm a big advocate for volunteering work. I think Hippocrates said giving from the heart is one of the best things. I can't remember the exact quote, to be honest. But giving back is, if you can do it freely, it makes you a better human for it, in my opinion.
For sure. I would absolutely 100% in bed with you on that one, Troy. I'm curious, the volunteer work with AMTA, is there anything that really sticks out that you learned from being on that side of the profession, either through the education chair director or the now in the role as membership director?
Yeah, I wouldn't actually be in those roles. It was the community. So in 2022, for people who listen to my podcast, they'll, if anybody does, they'll come across. In 2022, I got burnt out, and I pretty much quit the profession. In Quebec during COVID years, the clinic I work at was considered essential, so we never closed. I had a 3-week period where I didn't work, but that was it. It wasn't 3 months, it wasn't 6, it was 3 weeks. And when we came back, because our clinic was considered healthcare, we were slammed. I was doing 60-hour weeks of massage. Like, it was a lot. And that's because a lot of massage clinics did have to stay closed because they weren't considered essential. All the spas had to close, whereas we didn't, because we were considered medical. And so we would get people coming across our tables who should have no business being in our room whatsoever. Like, I had several DVTs, and I was like, that's an active staph infection. You need to go to the emergency room. And they'd be like, I don't want to. It's like, well, no, like, if you don't drive there, if you don't promise me you're driving there, I'm calling an ambulance. Like, this is a life or death scenario. And there were quite a few cases where people would come in with broken bones or injuries that were far beyond our scope of practice. But they came because going to the emergency room or the hospital had a high risk of COVID and long waiting rooms, long wait times. And so they were like, well, I can't get in to see my doctor, but you're available. I know you're not a doctor, but you're kind of in that realm. And so the hours became abusive, and shame on me for taking him on. I'm self-employed. I could have said no. But my wife wasn't working at the time, so there's also the financial component of, you got to do it. Eventually, she did start working again, and I just kind of kept the pattern up. And then in 2022, I was burnt out. I started seeing my clients as dollar signs, not as humans. I started getting callous in my behavior, and so I just said, okay. I went down to, I think, 3 clients a week. I took a job as a general manager of a restaurant, and I was done. And then I had already signed contracts to teach at the Canadian Massage Conference in Burlington, Ontario in the fall, as well as I was still volunteering with AMTA. So I had to go to a national convention. And I had one contract to teach, can't remember if it was South Carolina or somewhere. And essentially, when I went to the Canadian Massage Conference to teach, it was my first time teaching there. I didn't know the people. I got to know them. Like, since then, we've become incredibly close. I really found community again. And one of the things COVID did was create isolation. Like, as a therapist, we're alone in our room with a client. And then if you're self-employed, you're alone doing your taxes, you're alone doing your marketing, you're alone in your drive to and from work. And then I also travel for a living teaching. So at the same time, I'm alone at 2 a.m. on my way to the airport. And then I'm sitting on an airplane alone, and I'm sitting in a hotel room and alone, and I'm teaching. And when you're teaching to students, but you're alone because you're the educator and no one else is there. And so it was a very lonely life, a very lonely period. And when I found this community, I kind of like glommed onto it. Like, I leached onto it, honestly, and sucked out of it more joy than I probably gave. in the beginning. And then when I went to MTA National, which was the first one back from COVID, I remember feeling the exact same thing. I found this, oh my God, I'm not alone. And I remember prior to that, being at the AMTA conventions, I always had this subtle bitterness about the state version of the chapter AMTA being against the national version of the American Massage, state rights, national organization, big pictures, small pictures of state. And I used to have this thing of like, oh my God, they're out to get us. They're out to, control us. And why are we doing it the way national wants? And so this time when I went back to national in 2022, I made the conscious decision to intentionally avoid hanging out with certain people who were part of the board in Colorado, who had this bitterness similar to what I did. Justifiably, I will say this. I do feel like that bitterness was justifiable for them. But for me, I decided I want to get somebody else's experience. I see all these people at National Convention who seem to be really happy about AMTA and are super passionate about it. And I'm not one of them. I'm walking in upset that I have to be here. So I said, I'm going to intentionally avoid hanging out with these people who I'm incredibly close to, who don't seem to value their time here. And I'm going to go and hang out with these people who I don't know, and I'm going to get to know them, who seem to be passionate about this experience, getting to know the community. And I will point out, like, I'm an AMTA member. I currently volunteer with the AMTA. I'm going to the national convention this year. It's in Denver. I'm super excited about it, to be honest. I've been texting my friends. We're all pre-registered. It's great. We're super excited. But I'm just as excited to go to the Canadian Massage Conference. I'm in just as much communication with them. And I know other people talk about this with the World Massage Festival. And I know other people talking about other conventions. I use the word AMTA. Replace AMTA with whatever title you want. Whatever thing brings you community, oh my God, latch onto it. Latch onto it and don't let it go. Like, and give to it if you can. Give to it if you can. And so that's really where, for me, that's probably one of the biggest driving forces behind the AMTA for me and being part of that association. It has less to do with the organization itself, even though I am passionate about that. I've run for the national board several times and will continue to do so because I do want to have an impact. I do think, again, giving is valuable. But for me, the community is absolutely the reason to go to any of these events. It's that sense of belonging. It's the sense of being not alone. This is a very lonely profession, and it doesn't have to be.
Beautifully said, Troy. Can we talk a little bit about, because again, along with this, the idea of volunteerism, with this work with you being president of the school now, what kind of led to that? What were the dominoes that fell into line for that to happen?
Krista asked me. I said, let me think about it. I said, yes. I looked at my life and said, yeah, I think I have time for this. The fact that it's my old school is really cool. The fact that it's my alma mater, that makes me happy. But truthfully, she asked. And when I said yes, the curriculum's already been designed. The school is essentially very close to being ready to admit students. And I had already said yes. But since then, I've taken a look at the curriculum as well as the rest of the board. And there are parts of the curriculum that Krista and myself are both wanting to change. And so that is even more of a like, oh, wow. And she has since told me that's one of the reasons why she asked me, is that, changing the curriculum now gives us an opportunity to create a school that isn't going to be my vision of the world, because that would be a horrible way to look at the world, but it is going to have an influence of the neuroscience component. And to me, that's where massage schools need to be moving 100%. That's where baseline education across the board in the massage profession needs to be moving. We need to be willing to go into critical thinking and neuroscience much more than we ever historically have. And so I had originally said yes, purely because I'm passionate about the project. And now since then have become even more so passionate because now we also get to potentially have an impact on the actual curriculum design. And so we're actually creating a new planning advisory committee right now, which is going to help us design some of this stuff. There is a weird dynamic in that one of the founders of the school is my uncle-in-law. And I met him prior to having met my wife. And bizarrely enough, my wife had met my uncle who lives in France prior to me meeting my uncle. So it's kind of also a weird little workaround of that. And now I will be one of the new, founding members of the board of directors of the school that my uncle-in-law had founded. And it's just a little weird. Yeah, that's just a little weird thing that comes around.
Family history, though.
Yeah.
Correct me if I've got this wrong in my understanding, Troy. It sounds like the school had gone out of operation for some point. Do you know how long it was dormant for?
Yeah. So the way you said that's really interesting. I don't know whether to say yes or no now, because you said, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not wrong. So I don't know how to say that. Definitely don't need to correct you on that.
Okay.
I believe the school went out defunct in 2013 or 14. I'm not 100% sure on the exact date, to be honest. It went out because it had defaulted essentially on a bond, and so we eventually lost government student loans, which reduced student enrollment. And then the Naropa University purchased the curriculum and the building, and then Krista bought it back and started again. It's tried to get it up and running for 2 years as a for-profit, and one was unable to, and so this year transferred it into a 501c for a nonprofit purpose.
Wow. Awesome. Not many of those out there in massage therapy. So
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting in that regard because I really think it's going to have the potential to do interesting things. We'll leave it at that for now. We'll have to see what the future holds for us, but I really think we have some great potential.
it sounds like a good storm of ingredients you've got going there with that. Let's shift our focus again, if that's all right, Troy. I want to ask you briefly, what major trends, movements, changes have you witnessed over the last 2 decades? Is there anything you can point to that really felt like a turning point for the profession?
Yeah, I really think, I guess, familiarity with the term biopsychosocial and patient-centered care has been a big shift in the massage profession, healthcare in general, but very much massage therapy. And the other one would be evidence-based medicine or evidence-informed medicine, depending on how you prefer to talk about it. I really think those have shifted our understanding of massage therapy's role in healthcare because evidence informed. I did a really great podcast on this with Sam Jarmel, or Jarman, where we talk about evidence-based medicine has great value, and we should do things based off of evidence. We really should. Wonderful things happen because of evidence. We can put rockets in space because of the evidence of laws behind science. Like evidence has this incredible value to feed us knowledge and inform decision. But in massage, evidence-based medicine is founded in its bedrock on high risk concerns. If you're going to do brain surgery, evidence suggests this is the way to do it. If you're going to cut someone open, if you're going to give somebody a biochemical ingredient in a pharmacological medicine, evidence tells us this is the best dosage and exposure. Chemo is really valuable to be done in a good way, right? But the risk of massage therapy, not that I can't break someone's arm. I'm 240 and I lift weights. I'm a big guy. I could hurt someone. Not that I can't, but the risk of me doing it is pretty low. Whereas the reward of them feeling better for a session is quite high. Now, whether the reward is what they came in for, I have, IT band syndrome, whether that exists or not is a different subject. Let's say they come in for chronic non-specific low back pain and they walk out and they still have chronic non-specific low back pain, but they feel safer and they feel more confident to move. Did you have success, right? So our risk reward is really not the same as it is for some of these bigger interventions. And so evidence-informed care, I think, is really valuable, and it should impact our profession as well. But I think we need to look at it with a grain of salt on the level of risk reward. And evidence-based medicine is really opposing almost in nature to biopsychosocial, because biopsychosocial incorporates patient-centered care and all these things. And a lot of people say biopsychosocial is supposed to integrate evidence-based medicine, and they're right. It is supposed to, but by no means does it in its manifestation. I actually teach a class on this called Integrating Evidence-Based Medicine and Patient-Centered Care, because the two can coexist. It is just not, in its dynamic, even in their definitions, they tend not to coexist, but they absolutely can and they should. And I think we happen to be a group that does that. So I think over the past couple of years, seeing a shift away from the biomedical model of just the hip bone's connected to the knee bone and this and this and this, and if I pull on that, I think one of the ones I use a lot, one of the stories I use is, we've probably all heard that story about the person who had TMJ pain and somebody put in an insole in their foot, and the TMJ pain went away. And therefore, there's obviously a link between temporal mandibular joint pain and a dropped arch. But I put it to you that story is an outlier and probably a one-off, maybe a two-off, and that for the other 10 million people who have TMJ pain, putting an arch in their foot's not going to help them, right? And yet, I think some of the older, more previous understanding about how education and massage education works was, this is connected to that, and it pulls on this, the biotensegrity model. And I teach it in my class. I teach biotensegrity in my neuroscience class because it's important. But The majority of biotensegrity happens between the sympathetic and parasympathetic system, which means it's mostly uncontrollable. One of the governing rules behind biotensegrity is the law of energy efficiency. You don't control the law of energy efficiency. Your body does that without your permission. And call it a body budgeting, whatever it is, the way your neurons fire. You don't control how your neurons fire. You think and they fire. Like it's something that happens. You don't control how much bile is being used to help in the bolus and digestion process. It does that without your permission. And that's all based off of energy efficiency. And so I think the idea that the biotensegrity, structuralism, all these things was really dominant for a while is great. But I think we're seeing a transition away from it being as a dominant thought process as opposed to an integrated thought process, and that the trauma-informed care for me is really part of the future. We're seeing much more education around trauma-informed care, consensual touch, permission-based touch, starting sessions by saying, yes, they're paying to come and see you for a massage. Of course they are. That's why they're there. But still saying, even though they're on the table and consent is essentially an unsaid thing, it's a given, but still saying before you touch them, are you ready for me to touch you? Can I touch you? Still having those moments. The research is actually really interesting on what happens to vigilance and threat perception levels when that happens. And so trauma-informed care, I really see a lot more value coming into the future. I do think that, and I'm talking more generationally here, modalities will get swept out under the window. I don't think modalities will, I think it's 250 different recognized modalities in massage right now. I think ultimately it's just educators like myself trying to differentiate ourselves from someone else and say, I teach it this way, and so you should give me your money instead of going to see that person who teaches it that way. But long term, aside from modalities being really different, like Wishaw, cupping, ISTM, vibration versus hands-on, I think most touch therapy is going to get lump sum up into safe or unsafe touch. But again, that's more of a generational thing. I'm thinking more outside of even my lifespan. But I do see that being the future because we see it more and more. It's almost like this hourglass shape where we have all this swell of different titles and then eventually they'll come back together again. And then it'll be like this for a little while and it'll just be safe or unsafe touch. And then it'll swell out again into all these different breaks up of modalities with different terms, and then it'll come back together again. I really think that might be the future of manual therapy and touch therapy. And I see it too with even interdisciplinarian wise. I think long term, we still have scopes of practice and everybody wants their own jurisdiction, be it PT, OT, AT, whatever it is. But when you've been in the profession long enough and you work in a certain field for long enough, your touch starts to look surprisingly similar, and your interaction with clients and the questions you ask starts to look surprisingly similar. And I teach for kinesiotaping, and we have DCs and acupuncturists and PTs and massage therapists and PhDs and doctors who teach for us. We all talk about the human body the same way, even though we all have different training. And it's not to say that that's better or worse. It's just to say that your training and your title matter. But when you've been doing something long enough and have continued to educate yourself, I will say that, and have continued to make your brain a more powerful tool, over time, the lines begin to blur between, this title is important versus what you're doing is important. And so I actually see the same thing long term with that. I can see eventually, again, generationally, not within my lifespan, the titles also even getting pushed to the side and just saying, I do manual therapy. Manual therapy encompasses all of them. Touch therapy.
I didn't even have to ask you to prognosticate. You just went for it anyway, Troy. I love that.
Sorry.
I want to talk about preserving the past, some future-facing wisdom before we go into our closing thoughts. So first off, do you collect or preserve massage history in any sort of way? Books, stories, equipment, photographs?
Books, yes. But has less to do with massage. I'm a fan, I'm trying to get my hands on a first edition Lord of the Rings books. I have a sword collection. It's a very small one, but I have old swords from the Spanish Inquisition. I don't like antiques, weirdly, but I like collection things that are if anybody has one and they want to get rid of it, I will take a first edition Traeger book on trigger point therapy. Even though I don't do trigger, to me that's a collectible item that I would find valuable. In my office, I have on the wall. I did this last year. I purchased a bunch of 17th century prints of the human body, made by this German man that I found really unique and interesting and anatomically incorrect, but original prints from them. But it's more that I like the collecting component. It doesn't have to do with massage specifically. So I don't actually collect that much around massage therapy, unfortunately, no.
That's all right. That's a common thread.
I was going to say it's probably more common than not.
Yeah.
Now, I will say the stories of massage therapy I love correcting.
Mm.
Like my father's stories about, healing and shamanism and culturally, Carol Hart, who's on the board of directors with us, we had her come out to Colorado and teach Lomi Lomi. And listening to her stories and the historical components and the lineage and the value behind that I like hearing and collecting the oral histories. There is a big part of that about cultural appropriation, which I have a brutally hard time with, especially around techniques like Lomi Lomi and shamanistic and healing, where there's a lot of people who just say, I do this, and they don't come through the lineage. Now, on the flip side, I'm not a big fan of that. Like, I hate the idea of a master and apprentice and a lineage of therapists. Like, I could care less about that. Learn from who you can, who you feel passionate to learn with. Like that is far more valuable than I learned from this person who learned from that person who went through that lineage. To me, I think the oral stories of what massage can do have greater value than the stories we hear nowadays, which is far more common, of what massage therapy does. And I think the subtlety there, again, it's not even a nuance, really. It's massage therapy, we're told by specific people, does XYZ to the human body, breaks apart adhesions, blah, 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 blah. Those, to me, I find are less valuable. Those stories. The stories that are valuable are, we've been doing massage in this culture for 1,500 years, and it's traditionally related to an idea of holism or sickness or integration or puberty or manifestation or change of life or catalyst of behavior. Those stories to me are far more valuable than the stories of the cultural context matters, I think, more than the actual mechanistic context.
Why do you think today's students or practitioners should care about the history of massage? Do you feel that it could impact their work, advocacy, or professional identity?
Definitely impact their professional identity and their work. I mean, Ida Rolf is a great example. Ida Rolf talked about thixotropy with fascia, from a gel to a sole and back again. And then in a recording that not a lot of people like talking about, but that is definitely out there, she says, this is a theory and theory alone. Someone far smarter than me is going to have to come along and disprove or prove this theory. But she said it was just a theory, but it's taught as though it's fact. And the theory has been shown to be 100% inaccurate. Thixotropy doesn't happen in fascia. Definitely not in a time frame that's relevant to what we're doing in massage. If it does happen, it's over days, not over minutes or hours within a session. And if it is over minutes or hours, the level of heat involved, which is beyond 100 degrees, would be detrimental and be causing a burn. So we wouldn't do that. So the idea that thixotropy exists when it comes to fascia and collagenous behavior is shown to be inaccurate through very good mechanistic research, both by a lady, she was from the University of Anschutz. Another one is Robert Schleip. He does a lot of this good research as well on this stuff. And the story, though, of what Ida talked about, how we could impact the body, was a holistic person. Her story and created a cultural change, and that has great value. And if you study her stuff, you look at, oh, these are the impacts we can have on the body. These are the importance of it. And then you look to the modern science, you can say, oh, well, what she said was a theory. She was right in a lot of the ways in that she got results in her care, but she was wrong in this specific way. And I think that sentence right there is really where suddenly a massage therapist stops putting these prolific figures in history in the massage profession on a pedestal. The moment they sit there and say research shows that they were incorrect, it takes them down a peg, and it makes it go, oh, maybe I could do something. Maybe I could have an impact. Maybe what I'm thinking is real. Go get it tested, go check it out with research. But I think there's a lot of people who just say, I learned from this human, insert name, therefore it's right. And I think having an idea of who came before us and their ideas is good for us. But I think we need to take who they were and understand that they were humans and look at modern science and say, well, the theories they had, are they accurate or not? And if they're not accurate, it takes them out of this master apprentice level, which is very much an influence in massage therapy, because whether we like it or not, we are very much influenced by lineages and cultures and things like that. And that's part of their historical reference to touch therapy. But it takes it away where it says that maybe you have value as well. Don't do as they told you, do as you think is best, and research what you think is best and justify it through research, and not just because someone said. So for me, the history of massage is important in that we use it as a foundation to move forward onto, but not as a foundation to hang on to. And that's honestly what we see mostly when I sit in a class and I learn and I sit there and I go, oh, I was taught this 25 years ago in massage school or 20 years ago in massage school. And my dad was talking to me when I was young about this, and it hasn't changed. Well, that sucks. How unfortunate is that? That your theories have not evolved with time, and that they're not even your theories; they're someone else's in origin. So for me, the foundation is valuable, but it's not something to hang on to. It's something to build on top of.
Yeah. History with context, I think, is a big thing that we're focused on, or try to be.
I like that.
Let me take us into our closing thoughts, Troy. When you look back on the last 2 decades, what are you most proud of in your career?
In my career, oh, good addition. Honestly, being able to be a massage therapist and provide for my family. That is absolutely the thing I'm the most proud of. And that my only job has been massage therapy, that it is a career. It's not massage with a part-time job as doing something else. And I know that's hard. In the beginning, that wasn't the case. In the beginning, I was, I still bartended, I still waited, I still did, worked at a bagel shop, I still did these other jobs. But eventually being able to truly be passionate enough about what I do, to believe in it enough, to take the risk to say this is going to be my only source of income. And that, I took that leap in 2007. Since then, 18 years later, that is still my only source of income is massage therapy, be it teaching or clinic. Yeah, that's definitely the thing I'm the most proud of, because that's a hard thing to do. Not a lot of massage therapists are fortunate enough to be sole proprietors and provide for themselves or for a family. Providing for yourself is one thing, but being able to provide for a family, we're a family of 4. And there are periods where, when our daughters were born, my wife wanted time off, justifiably so. And for the first one, we didn't get it because we just couldn't afford it. But for our second one, when we moved to Canada, she didn't work for over a year, and I was the sole breadwinner. And to be a sole breadwinner as a massage therapist and provide for a family during a move internationally while we built a house and starting a brand new clinic from scratch, that's probably the thing that I'm the most proud of. Teaching wise, it's difficult. I don't often think about pride because it's not something I fixate on very much. I find it almost a waste of my time. I'd rather focus on what someone else is doing than my own behaviors. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know outside of that if there's anything else that I would be exceptionally proud of, because whatever it is that I'd be proud of in a couple of years, it won't have been real. I'll look back at it scientifically and go, oh man, I was so wrong. I was lying to all my clients about cognitive behavior therapy. I was lying to all my students about pain neuroeducation. I had no idea at the time. I thought I was right. And in 10 years, it'll be, oh no, this is the right thing. And I won't look back on it with pride. I'll look back on it with regret, almost like I did those first couple of years as a therapist, even though they created who I am, even though they made me who I am. So I don't think I have a lot of pride in my work beyond being able to provide for my family.
If I could offer, maybe the thing to be proud of is that you're willing to adapt and self-evolve and take in new information like that, Troy.
That's not bad. I like that. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't even think of that. It's something that I'm willing to do. So like my curriculum has changed so often, and like what I taught last year is already different. My class changes, I would say, every 6 months. It is a very different class, and it's because to me that's part of science. When you learn something new, you should update your material. When you learn something new, you like a new flavor, you should probably eat more of it. Like you should explore. You learn you like a new country, go there. Like you should explore. You should adapt. You should change. So I didn't even see that as part of it, because that's just something that to me is part of what most humans should be doing on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, that should word gets us in trouble sometimes. All right, next up, if you could record one historical figure's account of massage therapy, someone who is no longer with us, now deceased, who would you choose and why?
I bet you anything this name is not going to be rare, and that someone else has chosen this name. But I'm going to say Ambrose Paré.
Okay, no, that's the first time we've heard that here.
Really?
Yeah.
Ambrose Paré was the physician to King Louis XVI, and he's essentially the creator of modern day massage therapy. Ambrose Paré introduced the idea of essentially moving muscles, ligaments, and joints in specific ways to improve health. And that was a long time ago. That was before the French Revolution. Yeah, Ambrose Paré. That to me is probably that would be but he was a physician. He wasn't a massage therapist. He was a physician, but he's probably the closest thing to but also would potentially be the founding father of modern understanding of physical therapy as well. Because like what, up until I think early 1900s, physical therapy and massage therapy were the same thing. And they branched out, I think, just in between World War I and World II, they actually branched out. Might have been right at when PTs wanted to get a certification and massage therapy still didn't have that process. And so for me, that would be a figure who I think would be a very interesting person to speak to, because I think they would have a unique. They were going at a point in time when, prior to Ambrose Paré, physical medicine was not what it was, and after him, it was actively different and generationally. And so that mind would be something interesting to speak to because actively changed. I don't know how much of the world's culture, but a large portion of the culture of Western world was changed because of this one man. He introduced the ideas of pétrissage d'effleurage and tapotement, like that. That was Ambrose Paré who created. So to me, that would be an interesting person to speak to.
Okay. You've given me some homework, Troy, because
there's a great book that talks about him. I think it's called The History of Massage, to be honest. I have it in my office.
okay. All right. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to do some digging then. Kind of along those same lines, who would you like to hear next on this podcast? Anyone you'd love to see interviewed like you've been today, think has an important story to share with us?
Yeah, Tina Allen, she's incredible. If you can get her time wise, she's an OT by training, but she teaches a lot of pediatric massage. She's a beautiful mind and a beautiful soul, and we talk about each other like brother and sister. We've known each other a very long time now. And also Paul Ingram. I think Paul Ingram is possibly one of the most influential massage therapists in recent history through his blog and podcast, thepainscience.com. He has altered more massage therapists' minds into critical thinking than schools do. That might also happen to coincide with the time in history with social media the way it is and internet access. Both of them they'd be very different conversations, but both would be very beneficial.
Right. I'd love to see if we can snag an interview with either one of them or both. Final notes, Troy, before we get out of here. What are you up to these days? How can listeners learn more about you, your work, connect with you, support what you're doing? Is there anything you have to promote?
So if they want to support some of the stuff I'm doing, some of the easier ways is to buy me a cup of coffee on my podcast, Sensory Approach to Manual Therapy. You can support it there. It's not subscription, it's free, but if somebody wants to give me a cup of coffee, I will gladly take it. I'm a big coffee drinker, kind of how I keep my ADHD somewhat under control beyond working out. They can go to my website, troylavigne.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. I do a free research blog. I just published one the other day on what we call the fingerprint of pain from the University of Essex, which is when we do experience pain, the brain does actually light up with a fingerprint, and that fingerprint is the same. It's contextual, it's emotional, it's mental, it's psychological, it's physiological. And the fingerprint of pain can be changed over time. You can change it based on experience and note taking. And so you can subscribe to my newsletter and get access to all my previous. I analyze research blogs and talk about whether or not I think they were well done and break them apart for people who don't like reading research. I also have a couple of free or a couple paid online classes, one called, that's the most popular, which is called Pain, the Other Four-Letter Word, which is a 2-hour recording of a pain class, which is 2 hours of NCBTMB credits. And if people want that, they can write me privately and I'll send them, they can PayPal me and I'll send them the recording. I also have an integrated evidence-based medicine and patient-centered class online, as well as a class called I Am Placebo Positive on the effects of placebo in healthcare. And then I teach a lot. I'm teaching for the Florida AMTA in mid-February. And then first week of March, I'll be teaching at the Body Mechanics School in Tumwater, Washington. And then 2 weekends later that for the South Carolina NTA, weekend after that, North Carolina NTA. After that, I'll be in Dickinson, North Dakota, teaching the neuroscience of massage. After that, Colorado MTA. I just canceled my Minneapolis MTA event. They canceled it as well with everything going on in Minneapolis right now. Felt that it wasn't a priority. I'll be teaching at the Center for Neurosomatics in Florida in May, as well as a Canadian Massage Conference, and then teaching in Turkey and Istanbul in the fall, as well as New York, and we're looking at Ireland right now, and Pittsburgh School of Massage Therapy, as well as Indiana. I think that's it. I think that's my year. Pacific Symposium in San Diego. I think that's it. So they can, if they want to come take my classes, I'm all over the place, including out of the country.
Coming to a place near you. All right. I know we're at our stop time. Last question, as always, is there anything we didn't cover that you'd like to add? The mic is all yours. Run with that for however long you'd like to, Troy.
I think the only thing I really want to add, I mean, we talked about a lot. The thing I would urge therapists to go outside of their bubble of what they've historically done. Really, like if you've never done, if you're a sports therapist and you've never done relaxation work or energy work, go take a class and be open-minded. You will learn something of value. And if you're an energy worker and you've never done sports class, go take an orthopedic sports class. You'll learn something. I teach a class on ASMR massage because I get ASMR responses that I made up, and that I made up this 8-hour class around it. And I have this one student who took it who works at a geriatric center. And he said that's the only thing the geriatric people want now. That's the only type of massage they want. They get these earphones on, they create ASMR sounds, they do these really creepy touches that looks like a creeper, like it looks like feather touch. Like the goal is to give you the chills for 1 hour with no level of satisfaction, which some people think like, oh, that sounds creepy, but yeah, I find it euphoric. Go learn something you're not used to, and don't make it massage therapy. Go learn from a chiropractor. Go learn from fatigue. If you don't belong to the International Association for the Study of Pain, become a member. Get access to their pain journal. Take some of their special interest groups online, Zoom calls. Some are free, some are paid. It's so valuable to get out of your comfort zone and learn something new that you're not used to. It really matters.
Wonderful.
That'd be it.
Nice.
Thank you so much for having me, Kirby. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for making the time for us, Troy. Be safe. You know how to get a hold of us if you need.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider donating to the Society of Massage Archives so we can continue to bring you this episode and other resources to fulfill our mission of preserving and integrating the historical knowledge of massage therapy's professional advocacy and traditional techniques to guide and enrich our contemporary practices. Thank you. You are listening to the Hands of History podcast, production of the Society of Massage Archives. You can learn more about the Society at societyofmassagearchives.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. Do you know someone whose hands have helped shape the practice of massage? If you or someone you know would make a great guest for future episodes of this podcast, please email the Society at societyofmassagearchives@gmail.com. Society of Massage Archives, all one word, @gmail.com.